You went to the UN.
Yeah, I had a UN dinner.
What is the reception like when you talk to people at the UN? What is their reception to something like this?
So I don't know if it's positive now, but I don't know if it's because it's like, oh, that's cute.
Quaint.
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna ask. It's sort of like what are those steps? Like first they like smile at you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you or whatever.
Yeah, like Bitcoin. We're gonna go through that same phase with Bitcoin where it's like a joke.
When you actually become a real threat to their world order and their concept of how the world should be, they might, it might not be so friendly anymore, you know?
Exactly.
Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I am super stoked about today's episode. I am in person here with Chika Uwazie, one of the co-founders of Afropolitan. If you have not heard of Afropolitan, I'm going to give you the shocking headline, which is Chika and her co-founders are starting a new country. That is the end goal, starting a new nation state.
Yes.
And it's really built off of Balaji Srinivasan's network state concept. We're going to dive into what that is and how you guys specifically are thinking about this in phases. I will say, if that sounds radical to you, just stick around. I realized how deep I was in just crypto and Web3 when I really hit the point where I was like, yeah, I see this. You know, I'm like, this does not feel radical to me at this point.
It doesn't seem too crazy.
No, it really doesn't. But I'm thinking we're here in a studio. There's an audio engineer outside who may or may not be listening to this and is definitely like, what? This is the craziest shit. These people are off the rockers. So hopefully by the end of this conversation, if you're in that camp or you fall more in that camp, this feels a little bit less crazy and radical to you. It's really worth listening to this set of ideas because I think I think we'll get there.
And it's what
sometime in the next 100
years,
years.
Right?
It's totally what crypto is made for. I think it's a fascinating use case. So before we dive into all of the what's and the hows, though, I do have two asks for you. First, we do need to hear a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors, which we'll cut to in just a minute. Second, if you're watching this on the YouTube, please subscribe. We just launched the Overpriced JPEGs, separate YouTube from Bankless. So show us some love. Or if you're listening to this on a podcast app, rate, review, you know the drill. Thank you so much. And now here are our sponsors.
When it comes to NFTs, convenience often wins over security, despite scams being everywhere. Brands and artists have no other choice by complying with big marketplace terms and weak security because no good alternative exists, which is what prompted Ledger to fix the problems of NFTs themselves and launch Ledger Market. The Ledger Market provides an end-to-end secure NFT experience for brands, artists, and users, enabling true ownership and control over NFT assets, from minting to storing. Ledger Market secures NFT projects via Ledger Enterprise, keeping you protected from phishing attacks and scams. And the market directs users to Ledger Live, where they can transact with a contract directly, giving clear signing details instead of blind signing and praying. Don't trust, verify with clear signing from Ledger Market. Stay up to date on the latest drops and marketplace updates by following Ledger on Twitter and joining the Ledger Open Discord, which is linked in the show notes below. BUENO is the NFT toolkit you need to launch your digital collectible on the blockchain without coding. Every step of the NFT creation process, from generation to mint, all taken care of by the BUENO NFT toolkit. With BUENO, you can load up your art layers, reorder the layers, tinker with rarity, everything you need to make your NFT project a reality. BUENO even allows you to mint your tokens on the blockchain with zero code and offers advanced minting logic like linking allow lists, airdropping tokens, and on-chain royalty configuration. As a part of their launchpad, you'll get access to forums to run surveys, email collection, and build your pre-sale list to make sure you are hooked into your own community. BUENO is full of powerful tools you need to build the most expressive NFT project possible. So go to bueno.art and start building your own collections today.
Chika, I'm so pumped you're here. I'm pumped you're here in New York. Let's start with the basics for anybody who's not familiar with Balaji's work. Yes. And we should say Balaji is backing you guys.
Yes, he is.
Which
He's an investor.
Amazing. What is a network state, simply put?
Yes. In one sentence, a network state is a highly aligned community that crowdsources territory around the world to eventually become a diplomatically recognized sovereignty.
Whew. A lot to unpack there.
Yes.
Again, kind of.
I was like, make sure I have it right. But that's what it is.
An aligned community.
An aligned. That's the I think out of everything that I'm going to say today, it has to be aligned. It's not just a community. We're not just on Facebook or Twitter or wherever. We are all aligned.
And aligned meaning ideologically.
Yes.
It's not just, hey, we all are, to your point, on this social media network, which most of the world is or whatever. It's about kind of an ideological alignment.
Yes, because, and, we'll go into this deeper, but when Balaji talks about, why it's possible, right? He talks about social networks that have scaled, right? And they're big just as many countries, like Facebook is bigger than China, technically, right? But the key difference he always says, and that's why in the definition it has to say aligned, is because just because me and you are on Facebook, we might have different thoughts about the world, right? We're not aligned. We're not building towards one mission or one set of values, right? So the people who opt into a specific network state have to all align around the ideology of why we're building it and the what and how we're going to do it.
Just that alone does actually make more sense than the way the world is currently structured, which is arbitrary lines that were drawn by people for the most part 100 years ago or 70 years ago or hundreds of years, I mean, depending on where Middle East was carved up a lot more recently, I think. But and it's completely arbitrary. And you see how that plays out in the world in really negative ways, where you have, again, arbitrary lines drawn and then communities that were a community are now put in separate countries. And then, you have conflict. So again, if you're coming into the skeptical, I just want to stop and pause and say, reforming nations, identities, affiliations, whatever, along the lines of kind of common ground when it comes to how these things should be set up and what they should look like. Just makes more sense.
Yeah, because and I'll speak as a Nigerian, right? And I'm Nigerian American, but what actually drove this idea was when my co-founder woke me up and was like, "We need to start a new country." Something told me, that's cool. Elements. He just woke up and was like, "Let's go" at 5 a.m. But funny enough, something drove me to go to the Federalist Papers. Interestingly enough, and there is a paragraph in there that says, are we going to keep making decisions off of by accident and force, or are we going to make new decisions off of reflection and choice, right? And the thing is, Nigeria was forced. There's 400 tribes in Nigeria. And every time we get through elections, we are fighting each other because we were all forced together and we're not aligned. That's the truth. So for me, as I'm building this network state, and looking at where I'm from, we're literally in election season. It is driving the point more of why this is needed, because I feel like we didn't opt into this. Someone else from a different country across the pond decided we are going to become a country. And that's why we have been dysfunctional for over 60 years, right? And so for me, I'm like, I want to build a new space where I opted in and I reflected on it and I made the choice and decision.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the specifics here, because I have so many questions, even ones that I haven't heard Balaji address, and but I've heard him speak about this. So I think it'd be cool to get your perspective. How are you all going about this in stages? And probably worth mentioning, you're really building this around the concept of the African diaspora and folks from the diaspora. So maybe give us the why there and then break down the stages.
And I think it's important to say that the African diaspora is many different groups of people. And so people think or assume we're all Black, and we're not. So I think that's an important thing to say, because if you look at Northern Africa, it's very different than East Africa, than South. And, we're different groups and ethnicities. And actually, even further, some of the people that have approached me are like Indian descent. And they're like, but I grew up in Kenya. So I identify with what you're saying. I identify with this message. So I think it's important to lay that out, that we come in all shapes and colors. But the African diaspora is 250 million people around the world. Wow. And we send home $70 billion back to
250 million people.
People. Yeah, right? Wow. So we would be the 10th largest country if we actually were able to consolidate that, right? So it's an economical powerhouse that is right now, we're in isolations. We're all over the world, and we send home $70 billion every year, right? Wow. So taking just even a fraction of that and putting that towards an economical block. Can you imagine if just a little bit of that was put in a treasury or a DAO, and what could happen? So that is the reason why we're focused on the diaspora, because we have the numbers, we have the strength, and we have the human capital, and we're the youngest continent in the world.
Yeah, I was seeing some fascinating stats around that. By like 2050, 1/3 of the world's youths will be African.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's tremendously promising if you can get Africa and Africans and these, this largest, like 2.5 billion people, I think it's supposed to be by 2050, like on board with a kind of crypto, more decentralized future. Like That's great. That's very promising for what the future would look like. Not to jump the gun on this, because I think we'll get to the last stage of this is actually getting physical territory where everybody can congregate, but that comes after a lot of preliminary work.
Yes.
Why end with one spot rather than, again, having sort of parts of this network state geographically all over the world, because you already have 250 million people from the diaspora all over the world.
Yeah. So actually, we're not going to be in one place.
Okay.
Right?
Jumped the gun, and I would have learned this if I just waited around a minute.
Yes. So actually, we are proposing Afro towns, right? And we're combining two things that have already been done, two blueprints. So number one is, as you know, everywhere in the world, what do you always see? A Chinatown. Right? And the Chinatown, it's its own commerce. People are, there's an economy happening within the Chinatown itself. And I believe if someone spends money in a Chinatown, it moves around like 16 times within the town before it leaves, right? Versus actually Black communities. So they've actually figured out the economics of how they can move this money within Chinatowns, right? But the other part is embassies, right? So once you land in an embassy, so for example, as an American citizen, even if I'm in Nigeria, when I go to the American embassy, it is sovereign land, right? It is land that is owned by America, and it's covered by that sovereignty, right? So we want to combine the two, and basically we will have Afro towns all over the world where our community members have access to, but it also serves as sovereign land. And we're going to crowd fund that territory through the blockchain technology.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Yeah. So it's taking the Chinatown model, but then adding on this embassy model, which is to say you're sovereign. You're not actually even of maybe the broader nation in which your Chinatown is found, which in Chinatowns now they are. It's more like an embassy. That's really interesting. Okay. And then my second question is, we talk about it makes more sense to come together because of an ideological alignment.
Yes.
But you're talking about a geographical region and trying to align people, based on that geographical region. Is that at odds with one another to take both the geography and say, but it's also about ideology?
Yeah. So, and we'll talk about this with the first phase, which is the NFTs. But we actually are doing an application process because we are looking for a specific profile in the beginning, right? Because they will set the culture. So we are building a nation of builders, right? Literally, right? And so these are founders, these are operators, these are creatives, and these are all people who really love this idea and they're aligned with it. And again, the thing we always say, the mantra is you can opt in and you can opt out.
Yeah.
Right? So like a country, I can't really easily opt out of being Nigerian or American. I literally have to denounce my citizenship. But in this situation, it could be as simple as you have our NFTs and you decide to sell it because for whatever reason you don't feel you aligned anymore, or maybe you want to flip it. I don't know, but for whatever reason, right? You're opting out of what we are building, so you can opt in and opt out at any time.
It solves. If the whole world were designed like this, which again I do recognize that's radical. We're probably 100 plus years away, but it does solve, I remember being in political science classes in college, and what is it? Is it John Locke and the idea of the social contract?
Yep.
And it was that's such a lovely idea in abstract theory, but the reality is you can't just opt out of the whole world. You can't necessarily just opt into places that more easily align with you or you feel more aligned with. If the whole world was this way, you probably could. You could more find the places and easily opt in and out and into the places that you feel best serve and are recognized. So that's, again, why I love this and I'm optimistic about it, even though I recognize it sounds wild to many people. Okay, let's get into the specifics.
Yes.
So step one of this is what?
A network.
Okay.
Right? So before the state, you have to build the network, right? And the interesting thing about Afropolitan is we have been a network since 2016, right? And so we actually started in one place, which was the Bay. And most of the people that would come to our events were actually from the African diaspora. But all types of people also came as well. And they mostly work in tech companies. So most of the people who used to come to our events are actually techies. Right. And so that's why they're even more excited about this because they see it and they get it already. Right. And then, for us, what we're doing is now have to really rebrand, right? Because they knew us as an events company and we have to rebrand and re-educate on, hey, we're actually building a digital country.
Yeah, I'm laughing. I'm just imagining going to all these people who liked going to the cocktail hour and be cool. So love that you came to the cocktail hour.
Yes.
Now, how about this new country?
Exactly, right? And it's taken a while. We officially launched this new version of us in June and it's taken some time to really educate our community, right? But they love what we're doing. And essentially with the network, part, I would say B of aligning and re-communicating what we are is actually the NFTs. So actually we are, as of this, when this episode airs, the NFT subsite would have been launched. And we created a whole mythology around it, because if you're building a country, you need a mythology, you need a story that everyone is aligned and excited about. So we partnered with an artist named Ogosa. He's an amazing artist in Nigeria. And he created this art for us. And the story we're sharing is that all these NFTs represent a membership to what we're building, right? And it gives you access to these different benefits we're going to give to our community. But the art itself is actually representing the descendants of the Afropolitans, right? And we're going to spend a year telling this story. We're going to do a podcast. We're going to do a lot of things to really share this mythology. But essentially, it's this art, and it's showcasing Afrofuturism as well. So I'm really excited when people get to see the art and they get to own this beautiful membership, but it's also a utility as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so step one is building this like shared mythology for this new nation that says like, this is what we're all opting into. This is what we're a part of, which dovetails perfectly with NFTs because you have the storytelling, the art, the like immersive
and the community
experience,
right?
community quality that comes with NFTs. I know there's also there are like a set of core values that come with all of this.
Yes,
abundance. Like talk about the values that people are buying into. When
So our mantra is that we are a nation of abundance, right? And it was really important to share that because, our community has been operating in scarcity, right? And so sometimes, like, even us sharing this thing, I'll be honest, like, sometimes our toughest critics was from in Africa because they're like, they've never seen this before. Like, if you explain to them, like, I'm building the Uber of Africa or Nigeria, like, people would get that. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But then when you're like, we are building a digital nation, they're like, huh?
Yeah.
Like that just seems like way out of scope, right? So for us, it was really important we push this abundance thing. And that's even why like half of the work I do besides the NFTs is I'm right now working with different partnerships. I can't name all of them right now, but I'm literally working on partnerships that enable our builders to actually build. So I'm working with layer ones to give grants and funding opportunities. I'm also partnering with an accelerator, and we're building this partnership where they're already doing the accelerator, and we will be the official pipeline to African startups that want to be part of this, right? And so we are trying to give these benefits off to show them like, we actually believe in abundance and we're giving it to our community members as well.
I want to also pause on the point that's like, you say, oh, we're building the Uber of Africa. And people are like, cool, I get it. And then you're like, we're building a new country. And people are like, what? Because obviously we've been referencing that a bunch. But and biology talks about this quite a bit, right? Like new countries have been started within the last century. Like this is not it's not like this doesn't ever happen.
Yep.
And he said something, I believe, that stuck with me, which was like, Satoshi Nakamoto was an anonymous person or people on the internet who's on like Reddit style chat boards. You know what I mean? Like not who we think of as like the movers and shakers and like high power, right? Posted this white paper, and it's now legal tender in El Salvador.
Yes.
Like this is legal currency.
And DRC too in Africa.
And DRC, okay. Yes, so like you have multiple countries in which this is legal tender.
Yep.
And it started as a white paper on, like that's that is, like when you put that in perspective, you're like, yeah, this should be possible.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Like, because he always says
things happened.
That we started new companies and we started new currencies. Now it's time to start new countries, right? And basically what we're doing is we're putting all of these things together, the DeFi protocols and the smart contracts and the NFTs. Like, what is all that for? But actually putting it together to build a digital nation. Because if you look at our 4 phases, we're literally implementing all those pieces that have been built in Web3.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so start one, and I love the way you break this down. Start one, build that mythology, build that core network of people who are bought in for the mythology, for the value system, for the broader premise.
Yes.
I'm sure there's like there is plenty of events that come with that, I imagine, bringing people together, like, together physically, et cetera. What is phase 2?
Phase 2 is then, when we actually get to the product, right? Which is, NFTs is seen as a product, but it's more of, that's more of the identity layer, right? But then it's like, where will we live? right?
Yeah, okay.
Where are we going to have, conversations? When are we going to get through collective actions? And so we are actually going to build a community platform specifically for Afropolitans so that we can do collective action. So a simple example of what we're doing, but we need to transfer it to this app, is that for our applications, we actually have a community of community members who are actually having conversations around, okay, this is the application process, this is a ranking, this is a review, and they actually come together and have conversations, right? And so we have to create sub-DAOs, right? And they have to have collective action. And I don't think, it's not going to be on Discord.
Yeah.
It's not going to be on Discord. You're building a country. You can't rely on Discord to build your country, right? So we actually have to build our own platform. And so we will start going into that production next year. We already have some great product people, funny enough, who are at some of these companies, like Facebook and Coinbase and et cetera, who are community members, and they're already having conversations around what that platform will look like. So that's phase 2.
I think I saw that described as a super app. Is that how you're thinking? Like, I feel like people are, and let me ask you this. I feel like people are familiar with the concept of a super app, but they think of it as like, you get Pinduoduos in Asia, or maybe even WhatsApp, WeChat. Yeah, that's the right one. And, where you have commerce, socializing, some elements of gaming, all sort of wrapped into one platform. How much of it is like that stuff, and how much of it is almost like a citizen portal? Like, I think about how unmodern so many governments are. Like here in the U.S., it's like it's a different portal for your government healthcare, for your benefits or food stamps.
Exactly.
Like, it should just be one portal, and you have your NFT or whatever, and you just kind of sign in using it, and all of your government services are sort of under one umbrella that you can see, make your payment to, get your benefits from, et cetera. So in that, like, kind of between those two, like, what elements of that do you see coming in that second phase?
Exactly. So we see it as a society as a service, right?
Ooh.
That is what we're building.
Okay.
Right?
A different kind of SaaS.
Yes, different type of SaaS. And essentially, as we start building our benefits for our community members, it will live on this app, right? So they can always, whether it's like understanding the events, whether it's working groups, whether it's the policy, whether it's the constitution on chain, whether there will be a part where there's commerce actually happening, which is like through tokens, right? All that's going to live on the app. So that's what we're building. There will be some elements of like WeChat, like obviously like communication, right? But like, it's not totally the same thing as WeChat. I think that's a very different type of app than what we're trying to build. It's actually going to be custom made. And what I love about the NFTs is that as a community member, you're actually also opting into being part of this journey, right? So we are looking for our community feedback, right? They're going to tell us what they need and what's important for the community. So they're along the ride of building it.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like you're building mythology, in real life events, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're taking all of those elements that you have in that phase 1 and moving them into a central portal and platform. So it's like where you can go to the events, where you can communicate with people, you can see the mythology built out, et cetera. Okay. Step 3.
Yes. So we call this, instead of a minimal viable product that we know,
MVP,
it's a minimal viable state.
Okay.
Love it. I have everything so I can easily break it down for people. But so I'm going to give an example. And actually, there's 2 very recent examples. So the one that's most recent for all of us, right, is the Ukraine and Russian war, right? But how it's impacting Africa is that many African students left their country to go to Ukraine to go to school, right? Because we're very studious people. What I saw that was actually quite frightening was while there was, all these other countries came to help their people, when it came to African students, a lot of them were saying we're stranded. Like, we don't have a place to go. Our country didn't come in to save us, and we're just in this like weird limbo. And like, I've literally seen on Twitter students saying like they're out of school for the year. There's no way forward, and they're just kind of in this limbo. What does it look like for Afropolitan to step in because of our app and our collective action to actually be the ones to help? Right?
Wow.
Whether it's sending funding, whether it's saying, hey, we organize buses, we organize, a way out because we already started having conversations with other embassies, right? And that's what we want to do, is actually step in and help as state actors. And I'll even say another interesting example, and we did this through Clubhouse, right? So during 2020, so during during COVID, we had a situation in Nigeria called NSARS, and it was about police brutality. Now, the Diaspora, what we did was we got on Clubhouse, we started talking about the situation. We're like, we're not physically there. What can we do? So we're like, let's send money home. But then the government shut down the apps, right? But then what did we do? We started sending crypto. We started sending Bitcoin. So millions of Bitcoin was being sent back to Nigeria to help those on ground, right? And so that's what we're looking to do, is to kind of step in as state actors when the government has not.
Wow.
I think the second version of this, and this is, you were actually part of this, was the New York Stock Exchange, right?
This was awesome. It was so fun.
And so, you know, as great as it was for our community members, and they loved it.
Tell folks what happened.
Oh, yes. So essentially, we were recognized by the New York Stock Exchange for building the first digital country, right? And it was, we were alongside Van Eck, who's a partner, and we had a chance for both communities to connect and talk to each other. And funny enough, many amazing connections happened after that event. But how this ties into phase 3 is, can you imagine one of the oldest institutions in the world recognizing you for what you are building, right? That's crazy.
I know, I've got like chills.
Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're saying is, like, today New York Stock Exchange recognizes us. It's not a far leap for a country to recognize us, right? The UN to recognize us.
You went to the UN.
Yeah. I had a UN dinner.
What is the reception like when you talk to people at the UN? What is their reception to something like this?
So I don't know if it's positive now, but I don't know if it's because it's like, oh, that's cute.
Quaint.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, it's sort of like what are those steps? Like first they like smile at you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you or whatever.
Yeah, like Bitcoin. We're going to go through that same phase with Bitcoin
where
where it's like a
actually
joke.
become a real threat is not the right word, but like threat to their world order and their concept of how the world should be. They might, it might not be so friendly anymore, you know?
Exactly. But that's phase 3, which is just getting recognition. And already we have a few government agencies who are interested in what we're building, because we are potential opportunity to help them with talent, right? Because a lot of countries like Portugal and Estonia are issuing these nomadic digital visas, right? Because they need talent, because a lot of these countries are aging. Right? And Africa's like getting younger. It's like we have the vial of youth that we're drinking, right? And so they're like, we need your human capital. We need your talent. And so they see Afropolitan as a way to kind of solve some of those challenges as well. So I do see, in actually the near term, like 3 to 5 years, we starting getting recognized with certain, not only entities, but countries as well.
Wow. When you talk about a minimum viable state, what does that look like from a governance perspective? And you talk about, okay, we're going to mobilize and help get these, folks from Africa that are in Ukraine. Who's leading that? What is their, rights to be leading that? How does that come to be?
Yeah. So I see myself and Eche, my co-founder, we're just guides and we're visionaries, right? But what I want, and I'm already seeing this with our community members, is we're going to start having working groups. And so there will be a working group around statecraft, right? There will be a working group around policy. There will be a working group around treasure or funding, right? And so these working groups will act as our delegates to help with, hey, this is what we're dealing with. This is the proposal. And what I like about, smart contracts is we can vote on chain, we can propose on chain, and it's public and it's transparent for everybody to see. So that is the reason why this app is important, because what we're going to start doing is the proposals, the working groups, the voting, all that's going to be living on the chain for us to move forward. So it might not be me or Eche. It might be community members that come together. They give us a proposal and we vote as a block and we move forward. Yeah.
Do you worry about having to motivate or incentivize community participation? Like on the one hand, this seems so different to me than like your classic DAO. Like the why here is so powerful and strong. And I think there aren't necessarily as powerful or strong whys in like other DAO environments. On the other hand, it's a similar structure to DAOs where there's voting, and we see it's really hard to get participation.
Exactly.
How do you think about that?
So I feel like, and I can't speak for all DAOs, but I think a lot of DAOs are just like, just come on in, and like, they're not checking for that alignment, right? So I think people are just joining because it's cool, or like, I just want to be part of this, but they're not doing checks on like, are we actually aligned, right? So that's the reason why even on our application process, we're asking like, why do you actually want to join? And we need to know, is it a similar language than what other community members are joining for as well? But I think it's going back to what Balaji says, is constantly doing community checks. And if the community seem fragmented, then we have to ask ourselves, okay, where did we go off track, right? And how do we get back aligned? But it's constantly doing a pulse on alignment. I think that's going to be the way we're going to drive change within our community.
Yeah. And I just said this, but right, like it hits me different because it's so clear what you're driving towards, right? Like I worked for Andrew Yang's presidential campaign, and we had a really strong like online army that loved Andrew Yang, and the calls to action were usually heated, and they were very people were very engaged because it was very clear what the goal was. The goal was getting him in the White House, right? Yes. And then when that didn't happen, you know, like the community was still there, but like over time it fades away, and you can't maintain that same level of engagement because you no longer have the same perfectly clear true north that you're fighting for. And I think a lot of DAOs probably suffer from that, where it's sort of a more amorphous true north. You guys have a very clear, very powerful true north that you're kind of fighting for. Yeah. Do you see this playing out like that? What you're describing sounds very democratic. Like, do you see yourselves having to write like, again, a constitution clearly where you're like, here's the way that like, you know, laws are made, and the executive branch or the, you know, legislative branch, like how much into political theory are you guys in the process of diving into? Yeah.
So funny enough, we've already drafted a constitution. Right. But funny enough, in our chat with our community members, they've been asking about the Constitution. So we said, hey, we've drafted our own framework, but we don't want to ratify it, right, until we actually have community members who bought the NFT, the selected 500 are in like the delegates, and they're able to also review, and we all align again on the Constitution. Because if me and Eche come up with the Constitution and say this is what it is, our community members will be like, I didn't sign up for that.
Right. That's not really an opt-in, opt-out situation.
Exactly, right. So we're making sure we have our community members, and then all of them will actually digitally sign on chain on the Constitution as well.
Wow. And so you said 500. Is that the initial like NFT? What's the initial NFT sale? Give us some of the details there.
So it's going to be 500 NFTs, right? We are expecting people obviously to apply. And the cool thing though is we are going to release more NFTs. And these are deeper parts of mythology in the following year, right? So next year. So even if you don't get chosen in this 500, we're going to put everyone that applied on a wait list, right? And so we're going to do an on-rolling basis of acceptance for next year as well. So that's what the NFTs are going to be, just a small number. We went back and forth
I'm sure.
for a long time. We were like, is it 10,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 1,000? But then 500 just seemed like enough to kind of show there's a block, there's a movement, but also we're not getting overwhelmed. Because sometimes too, going back to this point of like alignment, when you have 10,000 different people all at once and like we haven't really figured it all out yet.
Totally.
That's a lot for, I think, an NFT community to be super aligned on versus like 500 people. It's easier to get that alignment. It's easier to get things going and proposals and voting in a smaller group.
Yeah. It's easier to get 500 people to all kind of agree on something than getting 10,000 people to all agree on something, which is probably a virtual impossibility.
Exactly. And especially because a lot of these NFT communities don't have like clear roadmaps either. So they're still figuring out themselves. Not that we're obviously figuring things out, but I feel like, again, getting 10,000 people and you're still figuring out your roadmap, that's a lot of different moving parts for a huge community.
Mm-hmm. All right, stage 4.
Yes.
So you got minimum viable state of stage 3 and stage 4?
Is when we are actually going for diplomatic recognition. Right. And so this is where we start having physical spaces, and you don't need recognition to have the physical spaces. Right. Like, I mean, I think a perfect example is like these clubhouses, Empire DAO. I was just there yesterday. Like, these are physical spaces. But then beyond just like it being a node, right, and what we're building, we actually want diplomatic recognition. And that could be as simple as, talking to a country like Bahamas that's very crypto friendly, right, and starting to have the conversations of what it looks like for sovereignty. And I think it could also look like going to some places that may not be, but saying, hey, we have this community, we have a framework, we have policies. And actually a good example would be Prospera, right? I don't know if you heard of them, but they're based in Honduras, and they are building a city-state, and they actually have a free trade zone where they have their own policies, and the only thing they have to follow is criminal law in the country itself, right? But interestingly enough, and this proves the point, because some people are like, well, what about if a country like tries to kick you out? So he had a situation where a new president came in, right, and basically was against economic free trade zones, but because he already had a policy set with the previous government that was grandfathered in, they couldn't come and remove him. right?
Wow.
And so these are the, we have to really go that deep when you talk about diplomatic recognition, is making sure that we have policies and things set in place. So even if a new government comes in, they can't just come and just offload us as well.
So spelling this out, you mentioned like Bahamas is maybe a good starting point. Like the idea there being you'll set up your Afrotown in the Bahamas and go to the government of the Bahamas and say, we need you to take these XYZ legislative steps or whatever it is to recognize us as sort of separate, and maybe we have to govern, be governed by your criminal laws or whatever. But otherwise, are like our own sort of self-sustaining, self-sufficient, whatever community here.
And it's happened before already. That's the point I'm trying to make. There's one in China, I can't remember the name, but they have their own policies and frameworks and laws. And there's actually a couple of cities in economic free trade zones where they have their own governance, right? But they just, again, follow criminal law.
Do you need international recognition, or to what extent is if you have this in 100 individual countries, that's enough?
Yeah. So honestly, I'm open to either option, right? The thing is, according to the UN, once one country recognizes you, you can actually go forward and say, we want diplomatic recognition. So it only takes one. It takes one country to diplomatically recognize you. But I'm also open with a scenario where we are just more like sovereign places with economic free trade zone agreements, right? I think even that will help us and protect us and achieve what we're trying to do long term.
Do you see a scenario where in some 100 years, 200 years, like this is primarily how the world is carved up?
Yeah. So, there is a network state dashboard, right? Okay. And there's about 26 groups who are attempting this in different variations, different ways, right? And Balaji is just he says, I'm just a figurehead, right? Like, I shared with everyone, the world, the framework, and I want people to go and prosper. And he's like, I believe we need at least 1,000 of them to actually get a couple of them actually recognized, right? So I do believe next year's going to be the year of the network state. I actually believe it. So similar to how you had the year of the NFTs, the year of the DAOs, the years of that, I think it's going to be compelling because, again, network states is combining a lot of the things that we built in Web3 in real world cases. And I think in this space right now, and I love what you said, you tweeted the other day, because you were in the bear market, we're seeing the real builders, right? And so I feel the networks, you have to be a builder. You can't just shield network state projects. You have to be serious, right? So I think as we go into next year, because Balaji's been going and making the circuit and speaking to different people, I think the idea is going to catch on, and you're going to see a lot more people attempting to build a network state.
Of the 26 that it sounds like it's happening right now, what are some of the different approaches you're seeing? I really like this Afrotown, it's itself kind of decentralized because you have people all over the world as opposed to trying to find one central island to go by, which I think Balaji has talked about. But what are some of the other approaches?
So funny enough, there's actually another one in Nigeria, right? And it's called Talent City, and it's actually the founder invested in us. His name is E. And his approach is actually building the land first, right? So he's actually has a land carved out in Lagos where he's building a community of people, right? And so I'm seeing people even what's the name, Praxis Society. They bought some land in Europe and they're building. So some people are doing the reverse,
land first,
which funny enough, that's not exactly what Balaji said, but hey, it's a version of it. Some people
it does feel a little backwards, if I could just say, because it's you want people to opt into the ideas. Not be well, I have this land, therefore you have to conform. You know what? It feels a little bit backwards in that sense. No judgment on it, right?
No
people are doing how they want to do it.
There's many ways to skin a cat, right?
Totally.
So however you want to do it. But and then there's some people who are pushing we want to be more nomadic, and there's a lot of nomadic themes I've seen in the network state. So some people are living out of their van, and it's a community of people there. There's City DAO as well. I actually met the founder as well. So I think there's interesting, ways that people are attempting to do their network state, right? And I just think I'm just curious to see who actually ends up being the one first. That's what I'm looking out for.
Yeah, I know. It does feel like a rising tide will lift all boats, right? If somebody can achieve it, some of these other projects can look at what they did and start to mirror it in order to have their own success. So you mentioned there's another one in Nigeria, in Lagos. Something you and I have talked about before is I think people aren't aware just how much crypto and blockchain energy there is in Africa.
Yeah.
And would love for you to share some stats around that and what you think the world maybe is missing a little bit about what's happening in Africa right now. And I think Nigeria in particular, but when it comes to crypto.
Yeah, so if you look at the top 10 countries in the world that are adopting crypto at just a general level, and then if you look at Ethereum and Bitcoin, Nigeria is actually number 3. Wow. Right? It's actually more increased adoption than America.
So who are 1 and 2?
I think it's China and India. And like it kind of goes back and forth just depending on when you look at the data. I think Vietnam is quite up there as well. But Nigeria in particular is always in top 5 of crypto adoption. And it's because we need crypto. Like it's not coming from like a utopian, this is cool, this is nice to have. It's like, our currency is shit, just to put it blankly, and I need a place to save my money that is less volatile, right? So people are using stablecoin like USDC, some people are using Ethereum and using Bitcoin. So there's a lot of user activity happening. And actually, you know what's more interesting is as soon as you land in Lagos and you walk outside, the biggest banner you see is Binance. You see this huge like Binance banner as you land from the airport. So that shows you like there's so much like activity, crypto activity happening. And I think even what's more interesting is that because, and they found out this statistic in 2020 was that they noticed remittance as far as fiat has gone down. But where did it all go? Crypto. Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head, I know like one of the problems like with remittances is like usually the central government, like I don't you know, in Nigeria or wherever it would be, I don't know what the facts are in Nigeria specifically, like end up taking a cut. If money is sent back in like, you know, US currency and it needs to be, you know, exchanged, you'll have a central government that will take a cut of that, which is why crypto is such an appealing alternative because you don't have that kind of taking a cut piece. Is that the case in Nigeria as well?
Yeah. So it's even more so that there's not enough USD in Nigeria. That's really the main problem. So I'm going to give you an example of what I experienced. When I was in Nigeria last year, and I was living there for 7 years, I had a tech company that I was working with in Europe, right? And so they used to send me my dollar in my Nigerian DOM account. So that is, it's a Nigerian bank account, but it's only for dollar, right? So I go into the bank and I wanted to take out some dollar because I wanted to go to, and we call it a bureau de change person. So that person will change the dollar to Naira for me so I can use it, you know, locally. For my daily life. Yeah. Do you know they want to give me my money? They're like, oh, we don't have enough dollar. I almost went crazy on them. Like I looked like a mad woman because I was like, wait, you can't give me my dollar?
Like, what do you mean? This wasn't ever yours. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, we don't have enough dollars, so we're taking your dollars.
They're like, we're broke and we can't give you.
And this happened across our desk. So.
Exactly. So I went crazy on them. And I remember after that incident, I was like, never again. So I went into my Slack group and I was like, I've been hearing you guys use crypto. How can I use crypto to get my money?
Wait, and so you literally just never got it?
No, like they wouldn't give it to me. So then I had to like go to a manager and like fight with them. And then they finally gave me the money. And you know how much I was trying to withdraw? Only $1,000. Only $1,000, and they wouldn't give it to me. So after that, I was like, I will never go through this again. So funny enough, a friend in South Africa who's been using cryptocurrency to exchange, he explained to me the whole process, and that's how I started using cryptocurrency for myself. So to today, like if I need Naira, I literally go to my Binance account, I get my USDC, I send him the USDC to his wallet, right? And then he puts the Naira in my account. But everyone is doing this because basically you're in a situation where they can tell you, I don't have the dollar for you, and you got to figure it out. So I was like, nope.
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless. Do you buy NFTs? Do you like playing in the profile picture games or searching for underpriced rares? Or you're part of an NFT community and you want that sweet social experience that your NFT brings you? Of course you want these things. It's why you're listening to this podcast, and it's also why you should check out SINTRA. SINTRA is the most powerful and friendly all-in-one time saver for NFT investors. A new social-fi investment app with real-time sales, floor price tracking, Twitter mentions, and 700,000 wallets, all available to check out. All infused into a social experience to connect you with other like-minded NFT investors. In Sintra, you can do your social media things like post, reply, share, ask questions, react, right next to where you showcase your beloved and cherished NFTs. And you also get a customizable feed of NFT activity, keeping you up to speed with the always changing meta of the NFT world. If you're not using Sintra, you're falling behind. So go to sintra.com/bankless and connect your wallet to enter the world of Sintra.
It's so compelling. Like, there was some tweet recently that was like, if you think there's no use case for crypto, like, you're so privileged. You know what I mean? Like, you live in some like highly developed nation. You know,
where there's like, Apple Pay everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, does not realize like where in a lot of the world, like how this plays out. That's fascinating. I also learned something because of you. That is, a lot of African countries don't have their own money printing. Like, it's European nations doing the money printing for Nigerian countries and then taking kind of not trivial cuts. Can you explain that? And if you can, like, sort of how that just affects the African economic system overall?
And this cuts across money, even travel. Like, if I start going, it gets real deep. So number one, I think out of like 48 countries. So most of the countries in Africa are still relying on US, Germany, I think London, like, to print their money, right? And then what's crazy is they take 6% of fees from them, right? So basically, every time you see Naira or whatever being printed, 6% of that is going back to a country in Europe, not even within Africa, right? That's number one. Number two is that all the Francophone countries, and this has probably been some of the biggest fights I've been seeing, is that 50% of their reserves are in France.
So if you're Nigeria, 50% of the Nigerian reserves of currency is in France. Well, no wonder they don't have any money to give you. It's in the wrong country.
So basically, it's like you're half operating, like you're not fully operating. And this even cuts across like travel too, where like a lot of the like Francophone countries are still being controlled by like European airlines. So like, for example, I had a speaking opportunity in Morocco, and I'm in Kigali, and basically there's no direct flight from Kigali to Morocco, right? Because there's still some like French control over there as well, as far as like airlines, right? So basically I have to go up to Europe or up to Asia, like up to Turkey, then come back down to Morocco. Right? So it's actually crazy how, like, technically, are we away from colonial rule? Yes, but not really. Like, not from a commerce perspective.
And that's what I was going to ask, is like, obviously this is all, you know, layovers or whatever from colonialism. How much has it not changed because these European countries are like trying to hold on to it and they want their 6%? And how much has it not changed because it's very hard to change legacy systems and there's bureaucracy? Like, how much is their intent here on the part of, call it, Europe? And how much is it just like...
And this is where it gets a bit debatable. Like,
it's hard to know.
I think if I was to say from what I'm seeing, I do think a lot of it is also on the African governments. There's an element of laziness. Like, they're doing it, you know, they already have the systems. Because a lot of the issue is like manufacturing, right? So like I can say specifically for Nigeria, we still have issues where we're an oil producing country, but we're still relying on like outside like Europe to like refine our oil. Like, we can't refine our own oil. That's actually crazy, right? And so basically, you're not getting the real money because the real money comes in the production. So I think half of it is like, we haven't built the systems to do it, so you do it. And instead of like really breaking through how to like change that system, it's not being done. And I think it's just so deep. I think it's going to take, again, a long time. And I'm not waiting.
I want to change it now.
I want to change it now, which is why I want to start off from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were also describing, that there's all this energy around blockchain in Africa.
Yeah.
And it seems like that would be a really great place to find talent because you have a whole bunch of, to your point, young people and a growing population of young people who clearly have a basic understanding of this and know how these communities work. I know I was just talking to the Battlefly team, which is a Treasure DAO project. And I know in the beginning, the majority of their community was Nigerians. Yeah. Like they understand how this NFT stuff is working.
Yeah.
Talk about like where that stands, like and how folks can, support Africans who want to get into the space, want to get hired. Are there places where you can go and find talent? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. So a lot of these DAOs and like DeFi protocols, if they really look at their data, it's mostly Nigerians in their systems, like the ones that are pushing the community up, right? So that's just like number one. And like it's funny because when we were looking for like product designers, there's like a whole side on Twitter where like there's Nigerians who like come up with like, oh, look at my crypto wallet, and then like all these like people on Twitter like comment on it and like give them feedback in real time, and they like they're iterating. So like I think it's called like 30 days of like building an open like product or something, and then you see people posting. That happens all the time in the Nigerian community where you see people on Twitter like sharing what they're doing in the crypto space. So I think people are just excited about it because Nigerians, we are overly ambitious and we're super entrepreneurial. It's in our energy, it's in our DNA. So I think naturally like crypto just makes sense. Even a lot of the top NFT communities are coming from Nigeria. What I would say is there are some companies that are focused on training on the talent. And even something we're doing at Afropolitan is we will have a vertical that will be focused on just like, hey, if you want to hire like, engineers or like even like designers, like we have a whole subgroup for that, and you can come and connect
like job
with them.
placement, job board,
exactly.
People.
So this is the reason why like I'm having conversations with the Eve Foundation and Near and Solana, and like we're agnostic because what we realize is that our community has builders across the board, right? And what we're basically partnering with them for is saying, hey, like you have grants, right? You do hackathons. We are actually the ones that are going to host hackathons so you can quickly identify these builders, right? And also you can give them grants as well.
So we talked about Nigeria a bunch. You mentioned DRC as being a country that's adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. I feel like, a little bit talking about Africa as a monolith, but obviously it's not.
Kenya, Senegal.
What are some of the other big countries that you feel like are really leading the charge here?
Yeah, so I would say Kenya. Like, for example, I was just speaking to the head of Near Africa, and he's based in Kenya, and he's Kenyan as well. So there's a lot of activity happening in Kenya. I would say Kigali as well in Rwanda. And I think just because the president is very just open to new ideas, and so there's some conversation around framework. Even Zanzibar, right? So there's a new DAO called Pando DAO, and they are an investment DAO, and it's like some of the best African tech founders are coming together to invest, and it's an investment DAO, and they're having conversations with how to create a framework to open up crypto regulation in Zanzibar. Even in Zambia, right? Interestingly enough, there's a founder, I'm blanking on the company itself, the name, but basically they're also looking to, build like talent cities within Zanzibar, and they're also looking at crypto framework, and even Ghana. So there's actually quite a number of countries within Africa that I think are actually more friendly than America, to be honest, when it comes to crypto regulation as well.
Yeah, I've been talking a lot about regulation this past week. I guess there's been news out about it. I was in DC yesterday doing a panel about it, and I'm nervous. I'm such an optimist that I think logic has to prevail.
Yeah.
But, DC does not always rule by logic. We certainly know that.
Yes.
So how much are you traveling, when you go back to Nigeria, are you traveling around to different countries to kind of talk about Afropolitan and gain support from folks there? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So something, and I think we need to talk about this more. So the first $1 million that was raised to start off Afropolitan was actually from community members. There was no VCs involved. It was just African tech founders and operators. And what we did was the idea was concepted in Nairobi, Kenya on December 23rd, 2021, right? I think like 2 days later on Christmas Day, we flew into Ghana, right? And we immediately started talking to like people there in Ghana, and they're like, we're in. How much do you need? Then we also went to Zanzibar. as well. And we had some community members we spoke to there that we went to Nigeria, right? And we spent like an additional month just getting, you know, our community members. Because funny enough, and this again is the power of the diaspora, is that a lot of these community members went to YC, right? Went to 500 and met Eche at his events in the Bay. So you see how it all comes
Connects
full
up,
circle,
yeah.
right? So a lot of these founders are people that were in YC, in 500. Even I met Eche because I was part of 500 startups back in 2016, right? And so these are people that came to, you know, the Bay to raise and do whatever in the tech world and went back home to their countries and built these unicorns, right? And like Shola from Paystack who exited to Stripe, right? And sold his company to Stripe. So these were the people that initially we pitched to, because we're like, these are the smartest people. And if they're like,
we'll be like, all right, we'll step back.
That was cute. That was nice. That was fun. But they're like, not only do we like get this, we are backing you financially, right? And some of these people don't back nobody. So actually, what's the interesting thing about us is people are like, how did you get Shola, Yele, like all these builders in Nigeria and across Africa, and all of them on your cap table? So like, and it was a proof of concept, right? So we actually did travel around, and we're actually doing a big event at Afrochella as well. And that's the biggest festival in Ghana. Like 15,000 people show up there, and we're actually doing a Web3 day at Afrochella as well. So like we go to literally these different countries and do community events, and also like connect with our community members.
Wow. What is the legal structure here?
So we have a foundation and we have a company, right? And really it's just to protect us as far as like the foundation holds the tokens, or if we decide to issue them. And then the company itself actually is the structure around Afropolitan, and we register in the BVI. So it's really straightforward.
Is that, how do countries usually get formed? Like, is it I feel like it is a company actually typically. Like,
yeah,
it's companies?
Yes, yeah, it is. I mean, because even like, even if you look at how US was formed, right? Like their fight was against a tea company.
Yeah.
That was the fight, right? So a lot of times it does start with a company, then it eventually turns into something else. Like even, for example, with Israel, today, 13% of it's owned by the foundation that started that journey for them.
Wow.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you never think about this because we never think about the legal structure of a country. But and I don't know, I don't have a specific example in my head, but I was like, I feel like I know that this is a thing that happens where you have these sort of like collective investment entities that go and start these nations.
Exactly.
And
you just have to read the history to see where the connection happens. But even across Africa, like a lot of like Nigeria, I think it was like, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the name, but it was like a very like the tea company. It's like a very basic name, but like these are like companies that actually started the foundation of these countries being made.
So not to get into gnarly questions, but like, what does it look like to have, you know, kind of venture investors who own something that turns into a country?
Yeah.
How does that play out?
So,
do we know yet?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I think the verdict is still out. I think the only thing I can say is that we need to get creative of like how much the VCs own, right? Like, and that's why we have separate entities versus like what the community owns, right? And I think for us, that was the reason why we even first started with the community, right? Because we wanted them to be the first to back it versus like we go straight to VCs and like, they're like, oh, this is a pump and dump. And actually what we've been pushing back on is like tokens. So like, we're not issuing any tokens until like we have a real economy, right? Because we basically were like, even if we have VCs involved, you're here for the long haul. Like you're not here to like pump and dump and like quickly get your little like your money back. Like it's a long-term project. So that's something else we've been kind of pushing back as far as like VC involvement.
Yeah. Folks know I've talked about this a bunch on the show because I do think we're seeing this comeuppance right now in NFTs of people being like, I think it was really the Doodles raise that set it off with people being like, wait, I felt like I was the owner of Doodles because of this NFT and now you have these VCs involved. And I'm very much not opposed to VC involvement in
we
projects.
Need to scale.
Totally. I think it's a matter of, do you trust this project? And if you're a holder, you should trust a project to be willing to stand up to VCs when there's something they don't agree with, you know, and to pick strategically who you have on the cap table. People who are actually bought into the same vision that the holders were bought into. And so if you're doing that, and it feels like just based on the way you've approached this and the people you have on the cap table, it sounds like are very are in it as much for the ideological good for the world outcome as much as for some return. I would imagine.
Yeah, and we're like, I'm going to be very honest. Like, we took our time with each VC. We were actually, not only did we take our time, but we even said we need like a United Nations. So we went to like Korea, Dubai, like different places around the world to be involved. So there's no like, you can't look at our cap table and say like, oh, it's all a bunch of American VCs. Like, you can't actually do that, right? Because we have a mixture of types of people. And even as we raise again, like, we're going to make it very clear, like, we're taking our time, and we need to know, like, just as like you're invested in us, like, we also know like you're in this for a very long-term approach.
So obviously you had got really positive reactions from a lot of these people you initially went and pitched to, and your, the community that was initially in Afropolitan for these events has sort of warmed up. Do you have friends who are like, oh my God, Chika is crazy?
We have some people that don't get it.
Yeah.
I will say that. And even funny enough, when like I said, we spent the first month trying to get, people across Africa aligned with what we're trying to do. And we had some people that are like, that doesn't make sense. I don't think it's possible. I don't see the pathway. Like, and to be honest, like, I rather have that, because if I don't have people that think this is crazy, then it's not crazy enough.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
It's not ambitious enough. So for me, we actually, like, we do need the people who are doubting. We do need the people who are like, this doesn't make sense, because it pushes us to get clearer on our message. It pushes us to get even more aligned with our community. And like I said before, like, I want to work on something that's audacious. Like, I don't want to work on like the next Uber for Africa. Like, that's cool. We need it, but I want to work on something bigger than that. Yeah.
Chika, thank you so much for joining me. I really am so excited to see how this all plays out and where you guys go. And we've talked about this too. I think what I love about having a super bold vision, as you said, is maybe it ends up here, or maybe you end up over here, or like, but just driving towards something really bold, in my opinion, usually means that you drive progress. You end up somewhere cool, even if it's not the original destination. And I just think that I so admire people who go for it. And they're just like, I'm gonna be bold. Let's close on where folks can mint. I think you said that. We'll link to it. The maybe say a little bit more on the application process. So we just can give people clear directives on like how to get involved if they want to. And can anybody get involved, or is it exclusively?
Anybody. No,
okay, so
anybody.
it's not just if you're from the African diaspora.
No.
Anybody who loves this vision, who wants to be involved in it, is welcome. I love
because
that.
For example, like, if you go to our website of the founding 50 Afropolitans, it's all types of people, right? So anybody can get involved. It's inclusive. Of course, like, just like any product or whatever, we always say like there's a target audience, right? But at the end of the day, anybody that loves what we're doing can be involved. And I think we need all types of minds and different types of people. But basically, there is going to be a Afropolitan website. It's going to be a citizen NFT website, right? Which is for the 500 passes. And you're going to see a button that says apply, right? And it's a simple, like 5-7 minute application. And we're just asking you questions around like, how do you identify yourself? Do you see yourself as like a founder, an investor, a creative, an operator, a policymaker? And we're just trying to classify these people so we know how to group them, because we're also doing peer groups, right? Where they're going to be connecting and talking and working things out. And then we ask questions around like what you've done in the past, like why do you want to be part of Afropolitan, and just, just general questions, like just trying to understand, people's profiles. And then essentially, you will get a onboarding email once you're accepted. And basically at that time, we also realize like not everyone is crypto native that's going to apply, right? So we do have a line where you can put your wallet, but if not, we're going to spend the next 5 to 6 weeks really educating people, and like we're going to do Zoom calls, we're doing in-person, meetings where we're just going to help you like set up a wallet, right? So you can get on board as well. And then basically you're going to get an acceptance letter as well. And we also have a Twitter account solely dedicated to like letting you know you've been accepted, as well. And then basically on the day of mint, you can go and mint your NFT, right? And we're doing a whole onboarding process. We have a team for that as well.
So cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to follow the journey. We'll have to have you back as we track your progress.
Each phase, right?
Each phase. Once you hit that stage 2, let's talk about that platform. Because frankly, I think there's probably other communities that are like, we're not trying to start a nation, but we don't like Discord. So is there something we can steal from this?
Yes.
Can we open source this? Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.